and welcome to the NEBOSH National General Certificate guidance video. This is Martin Crankshaw from NC Skills, and I will be taking you through the unit NG2 risk assessment submission, and this is basically an NG2 risk assessment guidance video. Okay. So as I say, my name is Martin Crankshaw, working for NC Skills. If you want to use this video, it's initially prepared for internal students, but if you're an external student with any course provider, then feel free. I'm happy for this video to be shared, and I'm happy for this video to be used by other training course providers. Okay. All we ask in return is if you click onto our YouTube channel and click subscribe. And then we will be, as I say, over the next few weeks, the next few months, the next year, we'll be uploading many videos. As I say, we're not looking for any money from them, but we just like to share this with our internal students. But if it helps external students, then that's good enough for me. Okay. So the first question you would be asking is, when would you be doing this risk assessment submission, and what is this NG2 risk assessment all about? Okay, well, you have the first unit of NEBOSH is NG1. Okay, NEBOSH General Certificate Unit 1. Okay, and the second unit is the NG2, which is your risk assessment submission. So for Unit 1, NG1, there's a 2-hour, well, there's now an open book exam for it, and which has just started actually, open book exam, and many questions and many different subjects. It's all about the management of health and safety, but in the NG1, or the first week, if you're doing a 2-week course, it does cover the subject of risk assessment and the training on how to do a risk assessment. The difference in the first part of the course, NG1, is you don't get to do a risk assessment. Okay, but you learn about it, and then what you get to do in NG2 is you learn about all the different hazard categories that would actually go into the risk assessment itself. Okay, so you would have working at heights, vehicles in the workplace, noise, vibrations, slip, trips and falls, chemical hazards, biological hazards, the list goes on. It's a full unit, NG2, and it's on all the different hazard categories. And now, rather than having an exam based on these hazard categories, questions that are hazard specific, now what NEBOSH decided was to get you to put hazards into a risk assessment. And it also gives you the opportunity to actually do a risk assessment and to have it marked by NEBOSH as well. And it gives you the opportunity to do an inspection of the workplace. And what I would strongly suggest is, if you are doing both units, NG1 and NG2, is don't start typing the risk assessment until after you complete your NG1 exam. That's what I would strongly suggest. You can, however, conduct the inspection part. Okay, there's no harm in conducting an inspection of a workplace. Okay, so what I would suggest is you conduct an area risk assessment. So basically inspect an area of a workplace. If you have a very large workplace, then it could take you days to inspect the whole place. So break it down into smaller sections. Maybe do a risk assessment covering the car park, the welfare facilities, and one of the offices. Okay. If you don't find the required number of hazards, then you can increase the area that you inspect. Okay. So as I say, you can do this before your NG1 unit. In terms of doing an inspection, it's better to walk round, rather than walk round with an inspection checklist, it's just walk round with a notepad. Okay, because hopefully you've studied your NG2 book, or you've attended a course which will take you through all the different subjects. So you should have a good knowledge of the subjects already, and hopefully you've studied them as well before doing the risk assessment. So take plenty of notes when you're walking around of all the different hazards that you find. And if you want to take photos, you can, but you're not allowed to add them into your risk assessment for submission. So it's only for your own knowledge. If it helps jog your memory, having a photo, then that's fine. Okay. So how many hazards are we going to be looking for? Okay, you're going to be looking for 5 different hazard categories and 10 individual hazards within these 5 categories. and you're probably sitting there going, what are you talking about? Okay, so let me take you through it. Okay, so 5 different hazard categories and 10 hazards within these 5 categories. Okay, well, there is a guidance document that NEBOSH produced which will list all the different hazard categories. Okay, but what we'll say, for example, one hazard category is slips and trips. Okay, that's what NEBOSH have in their guidance document as a hazard category. Okay, so that's one hazard category, slips and trips. And let's say you find 3 slip and trip hazards. Well, that's 3. 3 of these are slip and trip hazards. One category is slips and trips. So let's say slips and trips, we find water in the floor, we find a raised surface, and then we find the potholes. Okay, that's 3 individual hazards. So take 3 away from that. That's you now down to 7 hazards you need. And take 1 hazard category or hazard type, which is slips and trips. That's you now down to 4. Okay, it'll make a bit more sense shortly when I actually show you an example of a risk assessment. Sorry about that, just accidentally pressed the slide. Okay, so you should aim for ideally 15 hazards, or definitely more than 10. Okay, and more than 5 hazard categories. Okay, here's a guide. If you can find 15 hazards in 8 categories, that'd be fantastic, just in case NEBOSH maybe accuse you of duplication. Okay, maybe you've duplicated hazards. For example, you've got a slip and trip hazard, and you've decided one of the hazards is a box on the floor at the top of the staircase. The next hazard is a box in the floor at the bottom of the staircase, and then again it's a handbag next to the desk, with a kind of 3 objects. So I would personally class that as one hazard as opposed to 3 different hazards. Okay, so just make sure you look at the different types of hazard categories in your NEBOSH book, all the different types of slip and trip hazards. Okay, that's just slips and trips as an example. Okay, so what I'll do now is I will look at the NEBOSH guidance. Okay, so also don't leave the risk assessment to the last minute, and that's a big problem. A lot of people do leave it to the last minute, which then results in people not doing so well, quite simply because they spend that last minute, maybe one day before the submission date, they spend it doing the risk assessment, and they rush through it, which means they complete the risk assessment but they don't check it against the guidance. And the key thing is you need to make sure as you're doing it, you're always checking the guidance, the videos, and the example risk assessment. If not, you won't pass. Basically, you'll fail. Okay, quite simply, that's what will happen. I suggest maybe leaving 30 minutes a day would be quite a good kind of time period for you. Every day, 30 minutes is a minimum. It's not a big sacrifice. 30 minutes maybe before you start work, or instead of wait to the end of the day, but the choice is yours. Okay. In terms of workplaces, we talked previously about doing the inspection part with the workplace. If you can't find if you don't work in a workplace, you don't work, for example, then look to speak to a friend or family member or somebody, a business owner, local business owner, and ask to possibly use their premises. The risk assessment is confidential. It's for education purposes only, and you can even change the name of the company before you submit it. You can actually change the name. You don't need to use the real company name for confidentiality reasons. So if you let the business owner know that, then they're more likely to let you use their premises. Okay, so what we'll start off with, we'll look at briefly the new guidance, and then we'll look at the risk assessment.
So these are the documents that we're going to use. Blank risk assessment form, which is obviously the one that you complete. We have 2 different examples. We have the NEBOSH example and the NC Skills example. And then we have guidance. Okay, I'm going to click on the guidance document. Very important that you keep this, print it off if you can, or have it on a separate device, because this forms part of the risk assessment itself. Because not everything is clear, not everything is in the example. Okay, and also sometimes the guidance is not very clear as well. So you need to use both the guidance and the example, and of course this video, which will bring it together. Okay, there's two different parts to the guidance. Guidance part 1 is for learners, that's for everybody watching this, and then guidance part 2 is not for learners, that's for learning partners, also known as course providers. So just ignore that. Okay, so we have an overview of the risk assessment, which is here. Okay, you can have a read through that. And then we have what we call the different parts of the risk assessments. The risk assessment will be split into 4 parts, although it doesn't say part number here. Okay, we have part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. Okay, so this is part 1. Okay, and easiest way to show you this is to actually look at the form itself, but there's more detail here. Okay, so make sure that you read this. Okay, and again, this is part 1. Okay, then we have part 2, which is this part and what we call hazard categories, which we'll run through in the next video. Okay, here we go. This is all your part 2. Okay, part 2 again. And then we have part 3. Okay, very important because it's not necessarily clear when you look at part 3. Okay, but when we look at the part 3 video, then it will make a bit more sense. And then part 4. Okay, so there we go. That's your risk assessment. Yeah, we do, however, recommend that you take around 3 hours. More than likely, it will take more than 3 hours. Trust me. Yeah, from the day of your exam, NG1 exam, to the submission date of NG2, usually about a couple of weeks, a week and a half, 30 minutes a night. That's what I would suggest every night for that sort of, maybe 10 to 14 days. Okay, there we go. Just some guidance there. Okay, and well, as I say, this is just examples for handwritten versions, but don't worry about that. Okay, so for now, that's enough of the guidance, and I'm going to close the guidance, and I'm going to open just to give you a brief overview of what the risk assessment is and what it looks like. Okay, so here we go. Here is the risk assessment. Okay, you'll see there, part 1, all the details there. Okay, just a wee tip, don't leave any box blank. Okay, yeah, remember there's details at the bottom of the form you need to fill out. Okay, and then details at the top of people leaving this blank as well, for people failing because they've left it blank. So make sure you fill out everything. Okay, this is actually a kind of a newer version of the template that NEBOSH created. Okay, so this is what we call part 1, part 2. Part 2 is probably going to be your longest bit, a few pages. Okay, let's scroll down faster. Part 3. And then part 4. Okay, but with the way we will do the risk assessment is we will complete part 2 first of all, then we'll complete part 1, then we'll complete part 3, and then complete part 4. So this is just to give you an example. This is the example version. So if you've got another version, it's just a different color change. There's an extra few wee bits in it I do need to highlight, because people weren't reading the guidance, so they were failing for things that were in the guidance, but it wasn't very clear on this risk assessment. Okay, so yep, so that's us for this video, and if you watch the next video and find out a little bit more about part 2.